A German shepherd sat outside a closed church every morning before sunrise, but the day the dog walked up to a retired Navy SEAL with a folded note in its mouth, the message made him forget how to breathe. At first, Samuel Voss thought the dog was waiting for her owner. The church had been locked for months after a flood damaged the lower level, and most people in Briar Glen had stopped looking at it. But the German shepherd never stopped coming. She sat on the front steps in the cold, facing the locked doors like someone inside had promised to return. Samuel had been a Navy SEAL once. In that life, purpose was simple: protect the team, finish the mission, bring people home. But retirement had left him in a quiet town with too many empty hours and no idea what a man trained for war was supposed to do with peace. Then one morning the German shepherd stood, crossed the wet gravel path, and placed a folded note at his boots. 6 words were written inside: "Please open the door before Sunday." Samuel looked at the dog. The dog looked back at him like time was running out. Stay with this story, because by the end you may believe that purpose does not always return as a plan. Sometimes it comes back on 4 paws, carrying the message everyone else ignored. Samuel did not know it yet, but the German shepherd was not waiting for prayer. The German shepherd was waiting for rescue. A German shepherd sat outside the locked church doors at sunrise, holding a folded note in her mouth. Samuel Voss saw her from across the road while standing beside his old pickup with a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand. The morning was cold and silver. Fog hung low over Briar Glen, Vermont, softening the hills, the empty street, the closed hardware store, and the white church at the corner like the whole town had not fully woken up yet. The church was called Mercy Ridge Chapel, though there had not been much mercy around it lately. 6 months earlier, spring floods had swept down from the mountain and filled the lower road with brown water. The church basement took most of the damage. The fellowship hall, storage rooms, old boiler space, and emergency pantry all flooded. After that, the town board locked the building, hung warning signs, and said repairs would begin soon. Soon became summer. Summer became fall. Fall brought cold mornings and excuses. The doors stayed locked. The bell stayed silent. The steps gathered leaves, but the German shepherd came anyway. Samuel had noticed her 3 mornings in a row, first from the diner window, then from his truck. Then while walking past after buying batteries he did not need from the general store. She always sat in the same place halfway up the church steps, facing the doors. Black and tan coat, straight back, tired eyes. One front paw held slightly off the stone when she sat, like it hurt but not enough to stop her. No collar that Samuel could see, no leash, no owner. The first morning he thought she was lost. The second he thought she belonged to someone nearby. The third he understood that whatever she was doing on purpose. On the 4th morning she had the note. Samuel stood still beside his truck. The German shepherd stared across the road at him. She did not bark. She did not wag her tail. She simply held the folded paper in her mouth and waited. Samuel looked behind him as if the dog might be looking at someone else. The street was empty. Old Mr. Daly had not opened the diner yet. The thrift shop lights were off. A delivery truck idled 2 blocks away. No one else was there. Samuel sighed. "Of course," he muttered. He did not know if he was speaking to the dog, the morning, or the strange way life kept placing problems in front of him just when he had convinced himself he was no longer useful. He crossed the road slowly. The German shepherd watched every step. Her ears stayed forward. Her body stayed still, but Samuel saw tension in the shoulders and ribs, not fear exactly, readiness. A dog who had learned that help and danger sometimes wore the same boots. Samuel stopped at the bottom step. Easy. The German shepherd's eyes moved over his face. He had been stared at by men in worse conditions. Men waiting for orders, men waiting for rescue, men waiting to know whether the plan was real or just something said to keep panic away. This dog had that same look. Trust was not given. It was being measured. Samuel lowered himself into a crouch, knees complaining. He was 51, which was not old according to everyone who wanted him to carry heavy things, but old enough that the ground was farther away than it used to be. "You got something for me?" The German shepherd stepped down 1 stone, then another. Her paw touched the wet gravel. She came close enough for Samuel to see the paper clearly, folded twice, damp around the edges, held gently, not chewed. Samuel extended one hand, palm up. The dog did not release it immediately. For one strange second, they both held the note together, the German shepherd by mouth, Samuel by fingertips. Then she let go. Samuel unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, large, and dark from a marker that had bled slightly in the damp. "Please open the door before Sunday." He read it once. Then again, 6 words, no signature, no explanation. He looked up. The German shepherd stared at the church doors. "Who wrote this?" The dog's ears moved. Samuel turned the paper over. Blank. He looked at the church. Mercy Ridge Chapel had two tall front doors painted deep red, the paint peeling near the handles. A chain ran through both handles and around a metal plate that had been bolted across the seam after the flood. A laminated notice hung crookedly from the chain, closed until further notice. Do not enter, structural review pending. Samuel had walked past that sign for months. Everyone had. It had become part of the scenery. Like the old war memorial in the square or the broken street lamp near the post office. A thing people saw so often they stopped seeing it. The German shepherd stepped past him and went to the doors. She pressed her nose to the crack between them and whined. Samuel felt the sound more than heard it. Low, tight, urgent. "There's nobody in there," he said. The dog scratched once at the lower panel. "The place is locked." She scratched again. Samuel folded the note carefully and slid it into his jacket pocket. Then he climbed the steps and peered through the tall, narrow window beside the door. Dusty entryway, empty coat rack, old bulletin board, hymnals stacked on a table. Nothing moved, nothing called, nothing looked urgent. The German shepherd pressed her shoulder against his leg. That surprised him more than the note. She had kept distance until now. This was not affection. This was insistence. Samuel looked down at her. "I can't just break into a church because a dog gave me a note." The dog looked at him. He had the uncomfortable feeling that she disagreed. "I'm serious." The German shepherd walked to the side path. The church had a narrow gravel lane that curved around to a small parking lot and basement entrance. After the flood, the town had blocked that lower entrance with plywood and caution tape. The German shepherd stopped halfway down the path and looked back. Samuel did not move. She took 2 more steps, then looked back again. "No," he said. "Absolutely not." 5 minutes later, he was following her around the church. He told himself it was only to confirm there was nothing wrong. That was all. Confirm and leave. A man could check a building without adopting a problem. The side yard was wet from last night's rain. Fallen maple leaves clung to his boots. The church windows were dark. The old bell tower rose above them, white paint flaking under the eaves, cross still straight against the gray sky. Behind the church, the ground sloped toward a drainage ditch swollen with muddy water. The basement entrance sat at the bottom of 3 concrete steps. Plywood covered the door. Someone had nailed it from the outside. Caution tape snapped weakly in the breeze. The German shepherd went straight to the plywood and pawed at the bottom edge. Samuel crouched. The wood looked newer than the flood repairs. Too new. The nails had not rusted. The caution tape was weathered, but the plywood was clean enough that it had been replaced recently. He touched the lower corner. Damp, loose, he pulled. It shifted half an inch. The German shepherd whined. "Hold on." Samuel leaned closer. There was a smell under the wet wood, not just mildew, not just old basement, something else. Smoke? No, kerosene, maybe damp blankets, maybe old food. Maybe his mind inventing things because a dog had put 6 words in his pocket. He took out his phone. 1 bar, he called the town office. No answer. It was too early. He called the sheriff's non-emergency line, voicemail. He called the emergency number and got a recorded message telling him all operators were busy due to regional storm response and to stay on the line. He stayed on the line for 40 seconds, then the call dropped. The German shepherd barked once at the plywood, sharp. Samuel looked at her. "You know something." She barked again. Stood, walked back to his truck and returned with a pry bar. The whole time he told himself he was being ridiculous. Then he remembered how many times in his old life ridiculous had been another word for early warning. He drove the pry bar under the plywood and pulled. The first nail came free with a crack. The German shepherd stepped back but did not run. The second nail tore out. Then the third. Samuel pulled the panel away. Behind it was the basement door, not open, not broken. Locked. Padlock hung through a hasp, newer than the door, newer than the chain on the front, newer than the town's story. Samuel's expression changed. "Who locked this?" The dog pressed her nose near the bottom gap. From somewhere behind the door came a sound so faint Samuel almost missed it. 1 knock, then another, then a third. Samuel stopped breathing. He bent closer. "Hello?" Silence. Then, weaker, 3 knocks answered from inside the church basement. The German shepherd looked at him with those tired amber eyes. Samuel gripped the pry bar. For the first time since leaving the Navy, he felt a mission find him. Samuel broke the basement lock with a kind of precision that did not look dramatic because real urgency rarely did. He did not kick the door. He did not shout. He set the pry bar against the hasp, adjusted his angle, and used controlled pressure until the screws tore loose from the old wood. The German shepherd stood 2 steps above him, watching the road, then the door, then Samuel's hands. She seemed to understand that noise could bring help or danger, and she was deciding which one would arrive first. The lock fell onto the wet concrete with a heavy clack. Samuel opened the basement door. Cold air breathed out. It smelled of mildew, old hymnals, soaked wood, kerosene, and trapped dampness. He shone his flashlight down the stairwell. The steps descended into darkness. Mud stains marked the lower walls where floodwater had once risen. The handrail leaned away from the plaster. At the bottom, the beam caught the corner of a table, a stack of plastic storage bins, and the edge of a door hanging crooked. "Hello?" Samuel called. His voice moved down into the basement and came back thin. No answer. The German shepherd pushed past his leg. Samuel caught her gently by the chest. "Not first." She resisted. He looked down. "I know, but not first." Her eyes stayed on the stairs. Samuel had no leash, no harness, no reason to think this dog would obey him, but he pointed to the top step and said, "Stay." The German shepherd stood trembling, then stopped pushing. Good enough. Samuel took one step down, then another. The stairs creaked under him. Water dripped somewhere below. His flashlight swept left and right. The church basement had once been a warm place, he could tell. Long tables folded against the wall. A children's craft board with faded paper sheep still pinned to cork. A kitchen pass-through. Old coffee urns. A shelf labeled with handwritten tape, though the words were blurred by water damage. The flood had left a brown line around the room like a scar. Everything beneath it was warped, stained, or ruined. Everything above it looked abandoned in a hurry. Samuel reached the bottom. The German shepherd whined from the doorway above. "I'm here." 3 knocks came from behind the far wall. Samuel turned so fast the flashlight beam jumped. There was a storage hallway at the back of the basement, blocked by a fallen shelving unit and a sheet of plastic stapled over a doorway. Behind the plastic, something moved. "Can you hear me?" he called. This time a voice answered, small, dry. "Please." Samuel's entire body went still. A child. He crossed the room quickly, stepping around warped floorboards and overturned bins. "How many?" he asked. Silence. Then the same small voice. 3. Samuel pulled at the shelving unit. It was heavier than it looked, loaded with waterlogged boxes and old canned goods. He shoved one side, but it caught on a broken floor seam. The German shepherd barked from the stairs. "I'm working on it." He pulled harder. The shelf shifted 2 inches, then stuck. He needed help. He hated needing help. That was not noble. It was just habit. In the Navy, he had been part of a team, but retirement had stripped the team away and left only the muscle memory of being useful. He had spent 3 years in Briar Glen doing odd repairs, lifting things for church women, fixing porch steps, carrying sandbags during storms, and still feeling like a man pretending errands were purpose. People thanked him. He nodded, then went home with the same quiet question waiting in every room. Is this all now? In war, purpose had been painfully clear. In peace, purpose came dressed as small things, and Samuel had not trusted small things. The German shepherd barked again. This time, from the top of the stairs, she turned her head toward the road. Someone was coming. Samuel ran back up the steps. A woman in a green raincoat was walking quickly across the side yard, one hand clutching a canvas bag, the other holding a ring of keys. She was around 60, maybe older, with brown skin, gray hair braided down her back, and the expression of someone who had been worried for longer than one morning. "Samuel Voss," she called. He recognized her after a second. Alma Reed. She ran the town library, organized the church food shelf before the flood, and remembered every book a person had checked out since 1992. "Alma." She looked from the broken lock to the German shepherd to the open basement door. "Oh, thank God." Samuel stepped toward her. "You know about this?" Alma's eyes filled. "I know about the dog. Do you know there are people inside?" Her face changed. "People?" "At least 3. One child spoke." Alma covered her mouth. The German shepherd ran to her, not like a stranger, like someone recognized. Alma knelt and placed both hands on the dog's face. "Lantern," she whispered. "You found someone." Samuel stared. "Lantern?" Alma looked up. That's what the children called her when the church was open. She used to come during food pantry mornings. No one owned her. She belonged to the steps, I suppose. The dog leaned into Alma's hands, then turned back toward the basement. Samuel said, "I need help moving a shelf." Alma stood immediately. "Show me." They went down together. Alma moved slower on the stairs, but once she reached the basement, she did not hesitate. She looked around with grief pressed into her face. "This room used to be full every Thursday," she said. "Food boxes, coffee. Children drawing at that table while parents filled bags. When did it close?" "After the flood, officially for safety." "Unofficially?" Alma's mouth tightened. "For convenience." They reached the fallen shelf. "There's a blocked room behind this." Alma pointed her flashlight at the plastic. "That's the old emergency pantry hall. Why would anyone be behind it? Because the rear service entrance connects to the lower road, or did before the renovation crew sealed it." Samuel looked at her. "Renovation crew." "Benton Pike, contractor hired by the town board. He was supposed to stabilize the basement before winter." Samuel remembered the name, Pike Construction, a white truck with black lettering, a man in a clean vest who talked loudly at the diner and never seemed to have dirt on his boots. He sealed the rear entrance. He said it was unsafe. Was it? Alma did not answer quickly enough. The child's voice came again from behind the plastic. Please. Samuel moved. Alma helped. Together they unloaded the warped boxes first, tossing ruined paper goods and swollen cans onto the floor. Then Samuel wedged the pry bar beneath the shelf while Alma lifted from the side. On three, he said. 1, 2, 3. The shelf tore free from the seam and crashed sideways, missing Samuel's boot by an inch. The German shepherd barked from the stairs. Samuel pulled down the plastic sheet. Behind it was a narrow hallway, partially blocked by old donation bins and a cracked door. He pushed through. Where are you? A child coughed. In here. The voice came from behind a door marked in faded paint. Storm storage. Samuel tried the knob, locked from the outside with a sliding bolt. His jaw tightened, not stuck, not swollen, bolted. He slid it open and pulled. The door scraped the floor. Inside, in the dim flashlight beam, sat a woman and 2 children wrapped in church blankets. The woman was pale and shaking, one arm around a little boy, the other around an older girl. A battery lantern glowed weakly beside them. Several empty water bottles lay on the floor. A plastic bin of canned food sat open nearby. The little girl stared at the German shepherd behind Samuel and began to cry. Lantern came back, she whispered. The German shepherd pushed past Samuel and went straight to the children. She pressed her head into the girl's lap. The little boy wrapped both arms around the dog's neck. The woman looked at Samuel with dry, exhausted eyes. We thought nobody got the note. Samuel crouched in the doorway. How long have you been here? Since Tuesday night. It was Friday morning. Samuel felt the number land. What happened? The woman swallowed. The lower road flooded. We came in through the old service entrance because the shelter door was open. We were told the church supplies were still here. Then the contractor came. He shouted. We hid because I was afraid he'd throw us out into the storm. He sealed the entrance. Later, the inside door jammed. Then the bolt closed from the outside. Alma whispered, Benton. The woman looked at her. I sent Lantern with the note yesterday. She kept trying to get out through a gap near the boiler room. Samuel turned to the dog. The German shepherd had carried that note through a damaged basement, out through some gap Samuel had not even found, up to the church steps, and waited for someone willing to open a door. The little girl stroked the dog's wet fur. She waited outside because we told her to find help. Samuel's throat tightened. For years, he had wondered what use he was without a mission. Now a child looked at him from a locked church storage room, and the answer felt painfully simple. Open the door. Samuel carried the little boy out first. The child's name was Owen, which immediately bothered Samuel because the boy weighed almost nothing in his arms. 6 years old, maybe 7, wrapped in a damp church blanket, coughing against Samuel's shoulder with the exhausted trust of a child too tired to be afraid. The girl came next, walking with Alma's arm around her. Her name was Tessa, 11, brave in the way children become when adults have failed too many times in front of them. Their mother, Maribel Santos, tried to stand on her own and nearly fell. Samuel caught her before her knees hit the floor. Easy, she shook her head. I can walk. I know. He did not let go. Pride mattered, so did balance. Lantern, the German shepherd, moved between all 3 of them, nose touching each child, then Maribel's hand, then returning to the stairs as if counting survivors. 1, 2, 3, Samuel saw it. Alma saw it too. She kept count, Alma whispered. Samuel nodded once. He had known men like that, not many, enough to respect the habit. The basement stairs became the first challenge. Owen was too weak. Tessa could climb, but slowly. Maribel's legs trembled after days of cold and bad sleep. Samuel carried Owen with one arm and braced Maribel with the other while Alma guided Tessa. Lantern climbed ahead, then came back down twice, impatient with human pace. At the top, daylight hit them like mercy. The side yard was brighter now, fog thinning into gray morning. Maribel closed her eyes when the air touched her face. Tessa began crying silently. Owen looked at the church bell tower and whispered, "We're out." Samuel set him down carefully on the grass, then took off his jacket and wrapped it around the boy. Alma called emergency services from the side yard. This time the call went through. She spoke quickly, giving the address, flood exposure, 2 children, 1 adult, possible dehydration, possible hypothermia, and locked church basement entrapment. Samuel listened while checking the road. He knew the moment would not stay quiet. It never did. Truth attracted the people who feared it. Tessa knelt beside Lantern and held the dog's face in both hands. "You did it," she whispered. Lantern licked the girl's chin once, then turned her head toward the parking lot. Samuel followed her gaze. A white construction truck pulled in behind the church. Pike Construction. Benton Pike climbed out wearing a tan work vest, polished boots, and anger he had not yet arranged into charm. He was a broad man in his 50s with a square jaw, trimmed beard, and the kind of confidence that came from being the loudest person in most rooms. He stopped when he saw the broken plywood, the open basement door, the family on the grass, and Samuel standing between them and him. His face changed. Not much. Enough. "What is going on here?" Benton demanded. Alma stood. "That is what we would like to know." Benton ignored her and looked at Samuel. "You broke into a condemned structure. Opened a locked door. You damaged town property." Samuel glanced at Marable and the children. There were people inside. Benton's eyes moved over them too quickly. "Who are they?" Marable lowered her head. Tessa pulled Owen closer. Lantern stepped in front of them and growled, low, exhausted, serious. Benton looked at the dog with disgust. "And that animal again." Samuel's voice changed. "Again?" Benton realized the mistake. "I've seen it around." Alma stepped closer. "You knew Lantern was here. Everybody has seen that dog. You knew she was trying to get into the church. It's a stray." Samuel watched him. "You sealed the lower entrance." Benton turned on him. "Because it was unsafe. With people inside." "I didn't know that." Marable spoke then, voice thin but steady. "I called out." Everyone turned to her. Benton's jaw tightened. Marable swallowed. "When you were outside the storage hall, I called out. I heard your drill. I shouted." Benton pointed at the church. "The building creaks. Pipes knock. Flood damage makes noise." Tessa cried. "We banged on the door." Benton's face flushed. "I never heard you." Samuel took one step down the slope toward him. "Careful." Benton looked at him. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's advice." Alma walked to Samuel's side, surprising him. "Benton, why was the storage room bolted from the outside?" "How should I know? You were the only contractor with access." "Old buildings have old locks," Samuel said. "The bolt wasn't old." Benton's eyes snapped to him. "You a building inspector now?" "No." "Then stay in your lane." Samuel almost smiled. That phrase had followed him into retirement in many forms. Stay in your lane, relax, you've done enough, let committees handle it, let the board review it, let the town decide, let normal people manage normal problems. The trouble was, normal problems kept putting children behind locked doors. A siren sounded faintly in the distance. Benton heard it and looked toward the road. "You called emergency services," Alma said. "Of course we did. This could have been handled locally." Samuel stared at him. "It was handled locally, that's the problem." The siren grew louder. Benton stepped back toward his truck, pulling out his phone. Lantern growled again. This time she moved toward the rear of the church. Tessa looked frightened. "She smells it." Samuel turned. "Smells what?" Tessa looked at her mother before answering. Marable nodded weakly. "The other room." Samuel's chest tightened. "What other room?" Tessa pointed toward the basement entrance. "Behind the pantry. Lantern kept scratching there before we sent her out. We heard someone once." Alma whispered, "Someone?" Benton slammed his truck door shut. Everyone turned. He was not leaving. He had opened the truck bed and was pulling out a cordless drill and a tool bag. "Nobody goes back inside," he barked. Samuel moved toward him. "Put the tools down. That basement is unstable." "Then why are you going in?" Benton's face twisted. "To secure it before someone else gets hurt." "You mean before someone else is found?" For half a second, silence held the yard. Benton swung the drill up, not like a weapon exactly, but like a man reminding others he had something in his hand. Samuel closed the distance before the thought finished crossing Benton's face. He caught Benton's wrist, turned it down, and removed the drill with quiet efficiency. Benton gasped and dropped to one knee, not injured, just surprised by how quickly control had left him. Samuel leaned close. "I spent 30 years watching men make bad decisions with tools, weapons, radios, doors, and pride. Do not test me with a drill." Alma stared. Marable stared. Tessa's mouth opened. Owen whispered, "Whoa." Lantern sat down beside the children, satisfied. Samuel released Benton and stepped back. "Stay here." The first ambulance turned into the church lot. A sheriff's cruiser followed. Benton stood slowly, red-faced. "You assaulted me." Samuel looked toward the cruiser. "Tell the sheriff." Sheriff Ruth Calder stepped out before the cruiser fully stopped. She was short, solid, and carried herself like a woman who had spent years being underestimated by men who later regretted it. "Samuel Voss," she called. "Why am I never surprised when you're standing next to broken property?" "Morning, Sheriff." Her eyes moved to the family, then the dog, then Benton, then the open basement. Her expression hardened. "Someone explain." Alma did, quickly, clearly, with the precision of a librarian and the fury of a church elder who had discovered sin in a maintenance contract. Paramedics checked Marable and the children while Alma spoke. Sheriff Calder listened without interrupting. Benton tried twice. She raised one finger each time and stopped him without looking. Alma finished. The sheriff turned to Samuel. "You found them?" Samuel looked at Lantern. The German Shepherd did. Sheriff Calder looked at the dog. Lantern sat upright despite mud, exhaustion, and the sore paw she still held slightly off the ground. The sheriff's expression softened for 1 second, then Tessa spoke. There might be someone else. The yard went still. Sheriff Calder crouched to Tessa's level. Tell me, Tessa pointed to the church. Behind the pantry wall, Lantern heard it first. Benton said, that's impossible. Lantern stood and barked once toward the basement. Sheriff Calder looked at Benton. Funny, the dog has a better record than you do today. Then she turned to Samuel. Can you show me? Samuel looked at the basement stairs. He had spent years waiting for purpose to feel grand, like a flag, a mission briefing, a team at his shoulder. Instead, it looked like a wet German shepherd, a locked church, and a child saying there might be someone else. Yes, he said, I can. Samuel went back into the church basement with Sheriff Calder, 2 firefighters, and Lantern. He did not want the German shepherd inside. The dog was tired, limping, and soaked from the morning grass. But the moment anyone tried to keep her at the top of the stairs, Lantern fought the leashless air with a desperation that made Tessa cry from the yard. Please let her go, the girl called. She knows. Samuel looked at the sheriff. Sheriff Calder looked at the German shepherd. She gets hurt, I'm blaming you. Fair, Samuel said. Lantern went first, not recklessly, carefully. Nose low, ears forward, pausing on every third step to listen. Samuel followed close behind. The basement looked different now that he knew people had been trapped in it. The warped tables were not just damaged furniture, they were missed warnings. The mud line on the wall was not just flood history, it was proof of how high the water had been. The bolted storage room was not just an old room. It was a place where a mother and 2 children had waited while a town walked past locked doors. Samuel felt anger rise, but it was not the hot anger of youth. It was colder now, more useful. Sheriff Calder's flashlight swept over the fallen shelving unit. This was blocking the hall? Yes. And the room was bolted from the outside? Yes. Benton had access? According to Alma. The sheriff nodded once. He's not going anywhere. Lantern moved past the storage room where Marable and the children had been trapped. She did not enter. She sniffed the threshold, checked the blankets, then continued toward the back pantry. Samuel saw it then. A section of shelving against the far wall had been screwed directly into old studs, blocking a narrow service doorway that had once connected to the boiler room and rear shelter storage. The screws were new. The wood was new. The dust pattern around it was not. Someone had sealed this recently. A firefighter named Ruiz stepped close. This wall has been covered, Sheriff Calder said. Can you open it? Ruiz looked at Samuel. With tools, yes. Without collapsing half the shelves, maybe. Lantern pressed her nose to the bottom seam and whined. Then she scratched 3 times, paused 3 times. The rhythm was deliberate enough that every person in the basement noticed. Samuel crouched beside her. What do you hear? The dog stared at the wall. Sheriff Calder leaned closer. Everyone quiet. The basement settled around them, dripping water, wind moving somewhere through broken vents. A faint hum from emergency lights the firefighters had brought, nothing else. Then Samuel heard it, not a voice, not a knock, a metallic tapping, faint, uneven, from behind the sealed pantry wall. Ruiz muttered, I hear it. Sheriff Calder's face changed. She stepped back. Open it. The firefighters worked quickly. Screws came out, boards lifted. One shelf had to be cut. The whole time, Lantern sat at Samuel's side, trembling with restraint. He placed a hand lightly on the back of her neck. You did enough. She did not take her eyes off the wall. The last board came free. Behind it was a narrow door with an old brass handle and a cracked glass pane painted over from the inside. Ruiz pushed. The door did not move. Blocked. Samuel stepped forward. Let me. He set his shoulder near the frame and pushed, not with a slam, but with slow pressure. Something scraped on the other side. A fallen cabinet, maybe. The gap widened an inch. Cold air slipped through. Lantern barked once. A voice answered, not a child, an older man. Here. Sheriff Calder moved beside Samuel. Sir, this is Sheriff Calder. How many are inside? A pause. Then 1 man, 1 dog. Lantern shoved forward. Samuel held her back. We're opening it. Ruiz and the other firefighter helped. Together they forced the door open enough for Samuel to squeeze through sideways. The space beyond had once been a boiler room, then apparently a hidden storage area. Pipes ran along the low ceiling. Old shelves lined the walls. Plastic tubs were stacked against one side. The floor was damp but not flooded. Near the far corner sat an elderly man in a folding chair, one leg stretched stiffly in front of him, a cane on the floor just out of reach. Beside him lay a large old black Labrador, breathing heavily. The man had wrapped the dog in a church tablecloth. The dog's muzzle was gray. His eyes were cloudy, both looked exhausted. The man lifted one hand. Took you long enough. Sheriff Calder exhaled. Edwin, Samuel looked at her. You know him? Edwin Price, former church groundskeeper. Edwin smiled faintly. Retired, mostly. Lantern slipped past Samuel then and went straight to the Labrador. She touched noses with him gently. The old lab's tail moved once beneath the tablecloth. Edwin's eyes filled. She came back. Samuel crouched. You know the German Shepherd? Lantern. She started sleeping on the church porch last winter. I fed her when I came by to check pipes. His voice trembled. After the flood, I still came. Someone had to look after what was left. Sheriff Calder said, How did you end up sealed in here? Edwin's expression shifted toward shame. I came in through the rear service hatch Tuesday afternoon, found Marable and the children in the storage room. They were cold and scared. I was trying to open the pantry hall when Benton arrived. Samuel's jaw tightened. He saw you? Edwin nodded. We argued. He said nobody was supposed to be inside. I told him there were people here. He said he'd call it in. Then he told me to stay put while he checked the rear entrance. And Edwin looked toward the blocked doorway. He never came back. Later I heard drilling. By the time I reached the door, it was sealed. Sheriff Calder's face went hard. He knew. Edwin closed his eyes. Yes. The Labrador groaned softly. Edwin looked down. This is Amos. He can't climb. I wasn't leaving him. Samuel looked at the old dog. Amos's breathing was labored. He had likely gone without proper water too long. His hips looked bad. His body had the heavy stillness of an animal who had used all his strength simply staying beside his person. Lantern lay down next to him, nose against his shoulder. Samuel felt something move in his chest. He had thought purpose would come back by making him feel strong. Instead, it kept showing him creatures who stayed when staying cost them. We need to move them, Ruiz said. Carefully, Edwin snapped. Amos first. Sheriff Calder gave Samuel a look. He nodded. Amos first. The Labrador was too heavy for one person and too weak to walk. The firefighters brought a rescue tarp. Samuel helped slide it under Amos while Lantern watched closely. The German Shepherd growled only once when Ruiz moved too fast near Amos's bad hip. She's supervising, Samuel said. Ruiz glanced at Lantern. She's strict. Edwin gave a weak laugh. Always was. They carried Amos out through the narrow door first. Lantern followed so close her nose nearly touched the tarp. Then they brought Edwin. The old groundskeeper could stand with help but shook badly. Sheriff Calder supported one side. Samuel supported the other. As they came through the pantry hall, Edwin looked at the shelves of supplies. They were supposed to open this place before winter. Alma, waiting at the bottom of the stairs now despite everyone telling her not to come down, heard him. We tried. Edwin's eyes moved to her. Not hard enough. Alma flinched. No one spoke. Sometimes truth did not need to be cruel to hurt. Outside, the churchyard had filled with emergency vehicles and townspeople drawn by sirens. Marable and the children were in an ambulance being treated. Tessa shouted when she saw Lantern, and the German Shepherd immediately turned toward her, torn between the children and Amos. Samuel understood. Too many to guard, too little strength. I've got him, he told the dog, nodding toward Amos. Lantern looked at him as if weighing the promise. Then she ran to Tessa. Samuel helped load Amos into the veterinary van that had arrived behind the ambulance. Dr. Helen Marr, Briar Glen's veterinarian, examined the Labrador quickly. Dehydrated, old hips, exhausted. He needs fluids now. Edwin, wrapped in a blanket, tried to climb into the van. I go with him. Dr. Marr said, You need the hospital. I go with him. Sheriff Calder started to speak, but Samuel raised a hand slightly. He recognized that tone. Edwin was not being difficult. He was holding the last piece of control he had. Samuel crouched beside the old man. Amos goes to the clinic. You go to the hospital. I'll ride with Amos until Dr. Marr says he's stable. Edwin studied him. You know dogs. Enough to follow orders from one. Edwin looked at Lantern with Tessa, then back at Samuel. You promise. Samuel had made promises in harder places, some he had kept, some the world had broken before he could. He did not make them lightly. I promise. Edwin let go of the van door. Dr. Marr drove away with Amos and Samuel in the back. Lantern barked once from the church steps as they left. Not panic, not warning, something closer to approval. Samuel sat beside Amos, one hand on the old dog's shoulder, listening to his rough breathing. For the first time in years, he did not feel useless. He felt assigned. By Saturday morning, Briar Glen knew. Not the whole truth yet, but enough of it to stop pretending Mercy Ridge Chapel was only a closed building with water damage. 3 people had been trapped in the storage room. Edwin Price and his old Labrador had been sealed behind the pantry wall. A German Shepherd named Lantern had carried a note outside and waited on the steps until Samuel Voss opened the door. That version traveled through the diner, the post office, the general store, the library, 2 church group chats, and every front porch in town before 9 o'clock. The problem with truth arriving late was that it brought shame with it. Shame made some people quiet, others defensive. a few useful. Samuel saw all three types when he returned to the church after visiting Amos at Dr. Marr's clinic. The Labrador was alive, weak but alive. Edwin was at the hospital complaining about hospital coffee. Maribel and her children had been treated for dehydration and exposure. They would recover, physically at least. Lantern sat on the church steps again. This time she was not alone. Tessa sat beside her wrapped in a donated coat, one hand buried in the German shepherd's fur. Owen slept against Maribel in the back of an ambulance, a stuffed bear someone had brought tucked under his arm. Alma stood near the church doors with a clipboard and the expression of a woman preparing to organize either a rescue effort or a revolution. Sheriff Calder was questioning Benton Pike beside a cruiser. Benton no longer looked polished. His vest was wrinkled. His face was pale. His voice, though still loud, had begun to sound less like authority and more like a man trying to keep water out of a sinking boat. "I did not knowingly trap anyone," Benton said as Samuel approached. Sheriff Calder looked at him. "You sealed 2 exits, for safety. You ignored voices. I heard noises. You ignored those too." Benton pointed toward the church. "That building is unstable. You should be thanking me for trying to keep people out." Samuel stopped beside the sheriff. "People were already in." Benton glared at him. "You love this, don't you?" Samuel said nothing. "The retired war hero gets to save the day, town claps, dog gets a medal, everyone forgets this place was a hazard because people like Alma let it rot." Alma's clipboard lowered. Samuel stepped closer, but Sheriff Calder's hand came up, not to stop him from violence, to claim the moment. "Benton Pike, you're going to stop speaking now." Benton laughed. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet." "Then I'll speak." Sheriff Calder tilted her head. "Good, I was hoping you'd continue in front of witnesses." Benton closed his mouth. Samuel looked toward the lower road behind the church. Floodwater had carved a deep channel there months earlier, and recent rain had widened it. The rear service entrance was blocked by new lumber, plastic sheeting, and piles of construction debris. If Lantern had escaped with the note, she had not used the sealed door. There had to be another way out. Alma came to stand beside Samuel. "Dr. Marr said Amos?" "Alive." Her shoulders loosened a fraction. "And Edwin?" "Angry." "Then alive." Samuel nodded. Alma looked at the church. "I should have pushed harder. For repairs, for people." He glanced at her. She held the clipboard too tightly. "The pantry supplies were still in there," she said. "Blankets, food, emergency water. We asked for access after the flood. Benton said it was contaminated. The board said wait. I waited." Samuel understood waiting. Waiting for orders, waiting for purpose. Waiting for someone else to decide the thing in front of you was officially yours to act on. "You came when the dog did," he said. "After you called." "Still came." Alma looked at Lantern. She didn't wait for permission. No, she had not. That was the thing about the German shepherd that humbled all of them. She had no title, no authority, no clipboard, no key, no church vote. She only had a note in her mouth and enough loyalty to sit outside a locked door until one human paid attention. Tessa called from the steps. "Mr. Samuel?" He turned. The girl held up something small. "Lantern found another one." Samuel crossed to her. Lantern stood and stepped aside. On the stone step where she had been sitting lay a second folded note. This one was dirtier than the first, edges torn, one corner marked by a muddy paw print. Samuel unfolded it carefully. The handwriting matched Maribel's, but the ink was weaker, written with something nearly dry. "If the bell rings Sunday, they will lock the lower room forever." Samuel looked at Alma. "What happens Sunday?" Alma's face lost color. "The board vote." Sheriff Calder joined them. "What vote?" Alma swallowed. "To approve full closure of the chapel property. Benton's company proposed converting the building into private storage until repairs could be funded. The vote is Sunday after service at the school gym." Samuel looked at Benton. Benton had heard. His face gave him away. Sheriff Calder saw it too. "Private storage," she said. Benton lifted his chin. "Temporary use, legal, approved by the board if passed." Alma's voice sharpened. "You are going to lock away the pantry supplies. Most are ruined. Edwin was using them to keep people alive. Edwin had no authority to enter," Samuel said. "And Maribel?" Benton's face tightened. "She was trespassing." Maribel from the ambulance flinched. Lantern growled. Sheriff Calder stepped toward Benton. "You are very close to needing a lawyer more urgently." Benton spread his hands. "Sheriff, listen to me. If people find out the church basement became an illegal shelter, the town faces liability. If the supplies were distributed without inspection, liability. If the building stayed accessible, liability. I was protecting the board." Alma whispered, "No, you were protecting the contract." Benton looked away. There it was. The truth not confessed but exposed in the silence around it. Samuel looked at the church doors, before Sunday. The note did not mean open the door before a service. It meant open the door before a vote buried the last evidence of what the church had been used for and who had been ignored. Sheriff Calder turned to her deputy. "Secure all entrances. Nobody from Pike Construction enters without my approval. Get photos of every blocked doorway, pantry, supply, bolt, and repair." "Yes, Sheriff." Benton stepped forward. "You can't shut down my site." "Watch me." The deputy moved. Benton's phone rang. He answered angrily and walked toward his truck. Samuel watched him go. Lantern did too. Then the German shepherd suddenly left Tessa's side and moved around the church toward the rear. "Lantern," Tessa called. The dog did not stop. Samuel followed. So did Sheriff Calder and Alma. Behind the church, Lantern led them past the sealed lower entrance, past a pile of warped pew boards and down toward the drainage ditch. The ditch was deeper than it looked from the road. Floodwater had cut under the bank, exposing roots, stones, and part of the old foundation. Lantern stopped at a narrow gap beneath the church wall, half hidden by brush and a fallen shutter. She lowered herself and pushed her nose toward it. Samuel crouched. Cold air moved through the gap. This is how she got out. Alma knelt carefully beside him. From the boiler room. Sheriff Calder shone her flashlight inside. "Can a person fit?" Samuel studied it. "A child maybe, dog yes, adult no." Lantern pawed at the gap, then she sniffed downstream and stiffened. Samuel saw the change. "What?" The German shepherd moved along the ditch, nose low. 20 feet down, flood debris had piled against a culvert pipe, branches, plastic sheeting, broken boards, and one child's red shoe. Samuel picked it up. Tessa's voice behind them whispered, "That's Owens." Samuel turned. The girl had followed despite Marable calling after her. Tessa pointed toward the culvert. "He lost it when we first came in. Lantern kept trying to go that way." The culvert ran beneath the church parking lot toward the old cemetery slope, too narrow for an adult, large enough for a child or a dog. Sheriff Calder crouched. "Why would she go in there?" Lantern barked into the pipe. Once, twice. Then a sound answered from within. Not a human voice, a whimper, small, high. Samuel closed his eyes briefly. "There's more." Alma whispered, "More dogs?" Lantern barked again. The whimper returned. Samuel looked at the culvert, then at the sky. Rain clouds were building over the ridge again. If the ditch filled, anything inside that pipe would drown before nightfall. Benton shouted from the parking lot, "Stay away from that drainage line." Sheriff Calder turned slowly. "Why?" Benton stopped. Samuel stood. Purpose, he was learning, did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it stood in a ditch holding a child's shoe while a German shepherd barked into a pipe. "Get the tools," Samuel said. "We're opening it." The culvert was packed tighter than it first appeared. Branches had wedged across the opening like ribs. Plastic sheeting tangled around them. Mud sealed the lower half. Beneath the debris, water seeped steadily, carrying the cold smell of rain and earth through the pipe. Lantern would not leave it. The German shepherd stood close enough that Samuel had to keep nudging her back with his knee while firefighters worked to clear the entrance. Every few seconds, she barked into the pipe. Every time, a faint whimper answered. Tessa stood with Alma under a borrowed raincoat, watching with both hands pressed together under her chin. Marable held Owen near the ambulance, one arm around his shoulders, his remaining shoe dangling from one foot. Sheriff Calder kept Benton away from the work area with a deputy stationed between him and everyone else. "There shouldn't be anything in that line," Benton said for the third time. Samuel glanced at him. "You keep saying that, because it's true. Truth doesn't usually need repeating that much." Benton's mouth shut. Ruiz, the firefighter from the pantry wall, cut through a thick branch with a saw. Opening coming through. The debris shifted. Mud slumped forward. Lantern lunged. Samuel caught her around the chest. "Wait," she whined, twisting toward the pipe. "Wait," he said again, softer. Her body shook against his arms. It was the first time he felt how tired she really was. Under the dirty coat and brave posture, Lantern was thin, too thin. Her heartbeat raced beneath his hand. Her injured paw barely touched the ground. She had carried notes, found gaps, guarded children, warned adults, and now stood ready to crawl into a pipe because something inside still needed her. Samuel held her more gently. "I know." The last branch came free. Ruiz shone a flashlight into the culvert. "I see eyes," Tessa gasped. "How many?" Samuel asked. "At least 2. Lantern barked. The whimper became a chorus. Small dogs, puppies maybe. Ruiz lay flat and reached inside, but the pipe curved sharply. "Too far." "Can we flush them out?" a deputy asked. "With water coming," Samuel said. "No." The clouds above darkened. A cold wind moved over the churchyard. Alma looked at the sky. "More rain." Sheriff Calder checked her radio. "Weather says another band in 40 minutes. "Then we don't have 40, Samuel said. The culvert was too narrow for him, too narrow for Ruiz, too dangerous for Tessa, even if she could fit. Lantern pulled again. Samuel looked at her. The German shepherd looked back. He understood before he wanted to. "No," Lantern whined. No, he repeated. Alma touched his arm. Samuel. She's exhausted. She may be the only one who can reach them. He looked toward Tessa, the girl had heard. Lantern can do it, she said, voice trembling. She found us. Samuel hated the burden in that sentence, not because it was wrong, because it was unfair. Some creatures became heroic because humans failed to act sooner. He crouched in front of Lantern and held her face gently. You don't have to prove anything. The German shepherd licked his wrist once. Then she turned toward the pipe. Sheriff Calder said quietly, we can tie a soft line, no pulling unless she's in trouble. Ruiz brought rope. Dr. Marr, who had returned from the clinic after stabilizing Amos, checked Lantern quickly. I don't love this. Nobody does, Samuel said. The vet wrapped Lantern's chest with a padded rescue harness from the animal kit and attached a light line. 5 minutes, Dr. Marr said. If she struggles, we get her out. Samuel nodded, though he did not know if Lantern would accept being pulled from a job unfinished. He leaned close to the dog's ear. Go slow, find them, come back. Lantern entered the culvert. The line slid through Samuel's gloved hands. 1 foot, 3, 6, her body disappeared into the dark pipe tail last. Tessa began to cry quietly. Alma put an arm around her. Samuel crouched by the entrance, one hand on the line, the other braced in mud. Lantern, he called softly. No answer. The line twitched, then stopped. Samuel listened, scraping, a muffled whine. Then Lantern barked once from inside the pipe. The puppies answered louder. She found them, Ruiz said. The line moved again, backward now, slowly. Lantern's head appeared first, muddy and wet. In her mouth, held by the scruff with perfect care, was a small brown and white puppy. The churchyard erupted in relieved voices. Dr. Marr took the puppy immediately, wrapping it in a towel. Alive. Lantern turned and went back before anyone could stop her. Lantern, Samuel called. Too late. The rope slid again. The sky rumbled, not thunder, maybe a truck on the road, maybe weather. Samuel looked upstream. Water in the ditch had risen. Faster, Sheriff Calder whispered, though no one knew who she was asking. Lantern returned with the second puppy, black with white paws, alive, shaking. She gave it to Dr. Marr and turned again. This time Samuel caught the harness. How many? He looked into the pipe. A faint whimper still came from inside. Lantern pulled against him. He released her. Last one, he said, though he had no way to know. She entered again. Rain began, light at first, then harder. The ditch water darkened and moved faster around Samuel's boots. Ruiz cursed softly. We need to pull soon. Samuel held the rope. It trembled, then jerked, once, twice, then went tight. Lantern! No movement. The German shepherd did not come back. Tessa screamed her name. Samuel dropped flat in the mud and looked into the culvert. The flashlight showed nothing beyond the curve. The rope stayed tight. She's stuck, Ruiz said. Samuel wrapped the rope around his forearm. Lantern, a muffled bark answered, still alive, still inside. Dr. Marr said, careful, if you pull too hard. I know. Samuel did not pull hard. He pulled steady. The rope moved 1 inch, stopped. Another inch. Lantern growled from inside the pipe, not at him, but at whatever held her. Then Samuel heard another sound, a tiny cry. She had the last puppy. She won't let go, he said. Ruiz lay beside him and reached as far as he could. Can't reach. Water began spilling into the pipe mouth. Samuel made a decision. Tie me, Sheriff Calder said. Absolutely not. I can get my shoulders in, and get stuck too. Then pull me out. Samuel, Sheriff, he looked at her. Purpose doesn't ask if the timing is convenient. She stared at him for 1 second, then cursed under her breath. Harness him. They tied the second rope around Samuel's chest. He removed his jacket, dropped to the mud, and pushed into the culvert as far as his shoulders would allow. Cold water ran beneath him. The pipe squeezed his ribs. His right arm reached forward into darkness. Lantern! The rope moved against his wrist. He stretched until pain shot through his shoulder. His fingers brushed wet fur. Lantern, I've got you. She was wedged at the curve, harness caught on a broken piece of metal inside the pipe. In her mouth, she still held the last puppy. She had twisted her body to keep the puppy above the water, trapping herself in the process. Good girl, Samuel whispered. Impossible girl. He worked his fingers under the snag and freed the harness strap. Lantern did not move. Back, he said. She tried. Her paws slipped. Samuel slid his hand to the puppy and took it carefully from her mouth. For a second, Lantern resisted, refusing to release her rescue. I've got him, Samuel said. I promise. The German shepherd let go. Samuel passed the puppy backward to Ruiz's reaching hand. Puppy out, someone shouted. Alive! Then Samuel grabbed Lantern's harness. Pull us! Hands seized his rope. Mud scraped his chest and arms as they dragged him backward. Lantern came with him, half sliding, half crawling. The moment her front paws cleared the pipe, Tessa threw herself around the dog. Dr. Marr moved in fast, checking Lantern's breathing, gums, paws. Samuel rolled onto his back in the mud and rain, laughing once because breath was still available and the dog was alive. The church bell rang. Everyone froze. Samuel turned his head. The bell tower above Mercy Ridge Chapel stood dark and closed, but the bell rang again, one deep note rolling across the yard. Then another. Alma looked stunned. "The bell rope is in the basement." Sheriff Calder looked toward the open basement door. Ruiz ran inside with a flashlight. A minute later, he shouted from below. Wind through the broken rear panel must have pulled the rope loose. But Alma was crying. Tessa was crying. Even Sheriff Calder looked away. The bell rang a third time. For months, Mercy Ridge Chapel had been silent. Now in the rain, with the rescued children wrapped in blankets, Edwin alive, Amos alive, 3 puppies crying under towels, and Lantern breathing beneath Tessa's hands, the old church found its voice again. Samuel sat up slowly. His arms shook, his knees hurt, his shirt was soaked with mud. Lantern lifted her head and looked at him. He looked back. A man could spend years wondering if he still had a purpose, or he could answer the next door, the next note, the next bark, the next bell. The bell rang once more over Briar Glen. This time, people in town heard it. By Sunday morning, nobody in Briar Glen was talking about converting Mercy Ridge Chapel into private storage anymore. They were talking about the bell. They were talking about Lantern. They were talking about Maribel and her children, Edwin and Amos, the puppies in the culvert, the sealed doors, the pantry supplies, and the uncomfortable fact that a German shepherd with no official owner had done what committees, contractors, schedules, and polite concern had failed to do. She had opened the church. Not with keys, not with authority, with persistence. The school gym was full before the town board meeting began. Folding chairs covered the basketball court. People stood along the walls. Maribel sat near the front with Tessa and Owen, both children wrapped in donated coats that actually fit. Edwin sat beside them in a wheelchair, Amos lying on a thick blanket at his feet after Dr. Marr allowed a short supervised visit. Alma stood near the aisle with 3 binders full of records, photographs, donation lists, and enough righteous organization to frighten anyone with a guilty conscience. Sheriff Calder stood at the back. Benton Pike sat with his attorney, saying nothing. Samuel sat near the exit because he had learned long ago that exits mattered. Lantern lay at his feet. The German shepherd had been cleaned as much as she allowed. Her coat still carried traces of mud that refused to leave, and one paw was bandaged from the culvert rescue. A soft, borrowed collar rested around her neck. She kept lifting her head every time someone said church, basement, or dog. "You know this is about you," Samuel murmured. Lantern sighed. The board chair, Harold Finch, opened the meeting with a speech about unexpected events, community concern, and the importance of process. The room listened with the patience of people who had recently learned that process could lock children in basements. Then Alma stood. She did not shout. She did not need to. She laid out the timeline. Flood damage, delayed repairs, pantry supplies, Edwin's checks, Maribel's family seeking shelter, Benton's ceiling entrances, the first note, the second note, the locked storage room, the hidden pantry wall, the culvert, the puppies, the bell. Each fact landed without decoration. That made it worse. Benton's attorney objected twice. Sheriff Calder quietly invited him to keep objecting on record. He stopped. Then Maribel spoke. Her voice shook at first, but Tessa held her hand and Owen leaned against her side, and somehow that steadied her. "I didn't come to the church to steal," she said. "I came because someone told me there were blankets, food, a dry place until morning. I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know how bad things were, but my children were cold." She looked at the board. "The dog wasn't ashamed to ask for help. Maybe that's why she saved us." No one moved. Edwin spoke next. "This church used to be open when people needed it, not always neatly, not always conveniently, but open." He looked at the board. "A building can be unsafe, I understand that, but a closed heart is more dangerous than a cracked wall." Alma wiped her eyes. Samuel looked down at Lantern. The German shepherd's eyes were half closed, but her ears remained alert. Then Harold Finch cleared his throat. "Mr. Voss, would you like to speak?" Samuel looked up. "No." A few people almost laughed. Harold blinked. "You were involved in the rescue." Lantern was involved in the rescue. Every head turned toward the German shepherd. Lantern lifted her head. Samuel sighed. He had not planned to speak. He disliked public attention. He disliked being treated as a symbol. He disliked the way people used the phrase retired Navy SEAL as if it explained everything about him and nothing about the emptiness that came after. But then he saw Tessa watching him, not asking for a speech, asking for truth. Samuel stood. Lantern stood too. The room became quiet. "I spent most of my life in places where purpose was clear," he said. "Hard, sometimes terrible, but clear. Someone was in danger. Someone needed to be brought home. A door needed opening. A road needed holding. A man knew what to do because the mission told him. He looked at the board, then the crowd. When I retired, I thought peace would feel simple. It didn't. It felt like standing in a room after everyone else had left. People kept telling me I had done enough. They meant it kindly, but enough is a strange word when you still wake up with hands ready to work. Lantern leaned against his leg. He placed one hand lightly on her head. This dog sat outside a locked church because she knew someone inside still needed help. She didn't know about permits. She didn't know about liability. She didn't know about board votes or contracts or whether anyone would thank her. She knew a door was closed and it should not have been. He paused. Maybe that is all purpose is sometimes. Not a grand calling, not a uniform, not applause, just noticing the closed door in front of you and opening it before Sunday. The gym stayed silent. Samuel sat down. Lantern lay at his feet again, as if satisfied he had finally followed instructions. The vote was unanimous. Mercy Ridge Chapel would not be converted into storage. Repairs would begin under emergency supervision. The basement pantry would be restored, inspected, and reopened as a flood shelter and food distribution center. Benton Pike's contract was suspended pending investigation. A volunteer committee would be formed, though Alma immediately corrected Harold and said a working committee, not a talking committee. People applauded. Samuel endured it by looking at the floor. After the meeting, Tessa came to him with Lantern's new collar tag. It was simple brass, shaped like a small lantern. Dr. Marr had helped her order it from a local engraver overnight, which Samuel suspected meant half the town had conspired while pretending to sleep. Tessa held it up. "Can we put it on her?" Samuel looked at Lantern. "Ask her." Tessa crouched. "Lantern." The German shepherd sniffed the tag, then licked Tessa's hand. Permission granted. Tessa clipped it onto the collar. The tag made a small sound, not a bell, not exactly, but close enough to make Samuel think of the church tower ringing in the rain. Edwin rolled over in his wheelchair. "Where will she stay?" Samuel looked at Alma. Alma looked at Dr. Marr. Dr. Marr looked at Sheriff Calder. Sheriff Calder looked at Samuel with the expression of someone about to enjoy herself. "No," Samuel said. Lantern leaned against his leg. Tessa smiled. Alma said, "I don't think anyone asked you." Samuel looked down at the German shepherd. "I don't have a fence." Sheriff Calder said, "Fix one." "I don't have dog supplies." Alma said, "You live in a town that just donated 600 pounds of blankets in 12 hours. "I don't know if she wants." Lantern sat on his boot. The argument ended there. Lantern came home with him that afternoon. Samuel's house sat on a ridge above Briar Glen, small, neat, and too quiet. He had bought it because it had a workshop, a view of the valley, and enough distance that people would not casually drop by unless something needed lifting. Lantern entered the house carefully. She inspected the front room, kitchen, back door, hallway, and workshop with the seriousness of a commander reviewing a new post. Samuel followed, carrying the bag of supplies Alma had forced into his arms. Bowl, food, towels, brush, blanket, medicine for the sore paw, a note from Tessa that said, "Thank you for opening the door." He placed the note on the kitchen counter. Lantern jumped onto the old rug near the front door, turned in a circle twice, and lay down facing the entrance. Samuel watched her. "You know you can rest." She closed her eyes but kept one ear lifted. He understood. Some habits came from love. From fear, most from both. Over the next weeks, Mercy Ridge Chapel changed. The town cleaned the basement. Real inspectors came. Real repairs began. The pantry shelves were rebuilt higher off the floor. Emergency water, blankets, canned goods, flashlights, radios, and medical kits were logged properly. The lower entrance was reinforced instead of hidden. The rear drainage line was cleared and covered safely. The bell rope was repaired. Every Thursday, the church steps filled again. Food boxes, coffee. Children drawing at folding tables. Edwin came with Amos. Maribel helped sort supplies. Tessa and Owen placed a small water bowl outside for Lantern, though Lantern was usually with Samuel and no longer needed to wait alone. The 3 puppies from the culvert survived. Alma named them Matthew, Mark, and Luke, then admitted she was saving John for the next stray that needed help. Samuel tried not to encourage this. He failed. Lantern became the chapel dog, though she slept at Samuel's house. Every Sunday morning, she sat beside him in the last pew. Every time the bell rang, she lifted her head. Samuel did too. He no longer felt useless, not because he had solved his whole life, not because peace suddenly made sense, but because purpose had become smaller, closer, and more daily than he had expected. Fix the step, answer the call, carry the box, open the door, listen to the dog. The last one mattered most. One cold morning near Christmas, Samuel found Lantern sitting by the front door with a folded piece of paper in her mouth. His heart stopped for half a second. "Again?" The German shepherd wagged her tail. He took the note and unfolded it. This handwriting was Tessa's. Chapel breakfast, don't be late. Samuel looked at Lantern. She stared back. You are being used as a messenger. Lantern sneezed. He put on his coat. A German shepherd sat outside a closed church because the people inside could not open the door themselves. That was how the story began, not with thunder, not with a grand announcement, just a tired dog on wet stone steps holding a note in her mouth and waiting for one person to pay attention. Samuel Voss thought his useful years were behind him. He had spent so long knowing exactly what his mission was that ordinary life felt empty by comparison. No briefing, no team, no clear enemy. No one telling him where to stand or who to bring home. But Lantern taught him something that many people only learn after a long season of feeling lost. Purpose does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits outside a locked church. Sometimes it looks like a child's note. Sometimes it sounds like a paw scratching against wood. Sometimes it is simply the next right door to open. Lantern did not have a title. She did not have permission. She did not have a key. But she had loyalty. She had courage. She had enough love to carry a message through mud and darkness until someone finally listened. Because of her, Maribel and her children were found. Edwin and Amos were saved. 3 puppies were pulled from a flooding culvert. A forgotten church opened its doors again. A town remembered what mercy was supposed to look like. And Samuel remembered that a man does not stop being useful just because one chapter of his life has ended. In the months that followed, people said the church bell sounded different. Maybe it was repaired better. Maybe the cold air carried it farther. Or maybe people listened differently after learning what silence had almost cost. Every Sunday, Lantern sat beside Samuel in the last pew. When the bell rang, the German shepherd lifted her head as if counting each note. Samuel always placed one hand on her back and listened too, not for orders, not for applause, just for the quiet reminder that faith is not only something spoken inside a church. Sometimes faith is a dog who keeps waiting outside one. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who feels like their purpose is behind them. Sometimes the next mission is not far away. Sometimes it is sitting on the steps, waiting for you to open the door. And tell us in the comments, has a dog ever led you back to something you thought you had lost? Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, rescue, faith, and second chances. Until the next story, may God bless you, guard your home, and give you the courage to open the door when mercy comes knocking.